Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today, we're taking a closer look at those Replit agent updates. For all of us software engineers out there.
Yeah, definitely some interesting stuff in there. Could be big time savers, but, also maybe some things that'll make some of the more experienced devs kind of scratch their heads a bit.
Right. Let's jump right into it, the React support. Replit making a pretty big deal about this, especially now with that Cyber Monday thing they've got going on. But is it really all that?
Well, it's definitely a step forward. I mean, being able to just use React straight within Agent, that could speed up prototyping, maybe even full development. And they've got it working with like Shadgress and Motion. That's a good move, especially if you're trying to get those polished looking apps up and running quickly.
And I noticed they added Postgres support too, alongside the React, I mean. So
Yep.
that's got to be a good sign. You can build the whole app front to back, all in Replit.
Yeah, that's important. It's not just messing around on the front end. It's like being able to hook it up to a real database. Although, got to see how well that Postgres integration actually works. In the wild, if you've got those big queries, huge data sets, agent might struggle a bit with that.
Speaking of handling tougher stuff,
Hmm.
Replit's also rolled out multi-session support. So basically, you can work on different projects, different parts of an app, all at the same time, all within Agent.
Think of it like you've got these separate workspaces, one for each part of your app. Like, say you're building something with user logins and some data processing going on, and then the front end for the users. You could have an agent session for each of those. Keep everything nice and organized.
Yeah, sounds like that could help you stay focused, especially when you're switching between different tasks all the time. But how does that affect performance? If you've got all these sessions running, could things slow down, get unstable?
That's a good question. We'll need to see how they're managing resources under the hood. If it's not optimized right, you could run into some lag, maybe even crashes, especially if you're doing really demanding stuff or using libraries that eat up a lot of resources.
Okay, so one feature that really caught my eye is this thing where you can just take a screenshot or scrape a website and put it right into your prompt. Replit's saying it's for prototyping, but I'm kind of seeing some potential downsides there too.
Yeah, the main use case they're talking about is like one-click cloning. For the design, or even to grab some code for inspiration. For newer developers, that could be tempting. Just get a project started super quick.
Sure, but you always run the risk of people just copying code without understanding it.
Mm,
And ethically, I don't know, being able to clone a whole website so easily, that feels a bit iffy.
definitely. Copyright, giving credit where it's due, that becomes a big issue. Replit's going to need some really clear rules about this and ways to prevent people from abusing it. It's powerful, no doubt, but it needs to be used responsibly.
All right, let's shift gears a bit. Talk visuals. Replit's gone and integrated Unsplash directly into Agent. So now you can grab all those stock images right there in the editor.
Yeah, streamlines the process for sure.
Yeah.
Plus, they've improved how you work with images in the editor. You can resize stuff, make adjustments, all without needing other tools.
That sounds pretty slick, user-friendly and all. But I do wonder, is Unsplash enough? It's great, don't get me wrong, but it has a certain look. What about developers who need something more specific, more, creative control?
Yeah, good point. Unsplash is a good starting point, but it can't be the only option. They need to make sure developers can still bring in their own images, manage them easily, even with this whole visual focus they've got going on.
Right. Okay, now for all those folks who love Git, there's a Git commit viewer built right into Agent now. So no more jumping back and forth between the terminal and the editor to see your history.
Yeah, I gotta say, that's a nice quality of life improvement. You can just browse your commits, see all the details, all without leaving Agent. Feels like they're really pushing for this everything in one place kind of setup.
But is it enough?
Yeah.
You can only view commits? What about all the other stuff? Merging, branching, fixing conflicts. Can you do all that smoothly with any agent too?
That's the big question, right? Replit wants to make things simple, but for those of us who've been doing this a while, we need those more advanced Git features. Got to see how deep they go with the integration.
Okay, I think we've covered most of the shiny new stuff. What about the stuff under the hood? Replit saying they've made performance better, more stable, better memory management, all that.
That's crucial, especially with all these new features they keep adding. If Agent can't handle real projects, those big code bases, without crashing or slowing to a crawl, well, the fancy features don't matter much then, do they?
So the real test is how it performs when people are actually using it. Can it stay stable with all those sessions running? Can it handle those huge data sets, complex queries, all that? That's what we'll be watching for.
Absolutely. The performance claims sound good, but we need to see it in action. Benchmarks, real-world tests, feedback from developers who are really pushing it to the limit, that's how we'll know if they've actually delivered.
You know what? That's a perfect place to pause for a second. When we come back, we're going to dig into the potential downsides, the challenges that these updates might bring, especially for those of us who've been coding for a while. Performance, complexity, the whole thing about relying too much on AI. We'll get into all that. Stay with us.
All right, so we talked about all the cool new stuff, all the shiny features they've added to Replit Agent, but gotta be realistic, right? There's always another side to things, and I think, especially for devs who've been at it for a while, there are some downsides here that we gotta talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that really makes me wonder is this whole uh, reliance on AI thing. I mean, sure, agent can write code for you, even whole functions, based on what you tell it to do. But what happens when people just start copying and pasting that stuff without actually getting it? You know what I mean?
It's tricky. It's like you start using the AI for those quick fixes, and before you know it, you've kind of forgotten the basics. It's like using a calculator when you don't even know how to do basic math. You get the answer, sure, but you don't know how you got there, and you can't fix it if something goes wrong.
Exactly. And that can lead to all sorts of problems later on. Inefficient code, security holes, and you just don't have control over your own project anymore.
And don't forget about debugging. Trying to fix code that you don't understand, that the AI just spat out. It's a nightmare. It's like you're trying to figure out a magic trick and you just get more and more lost.
Yeah, it's not just about getting the project done quickly. The long-term effects of leaning too hard on AI, that could be a real problem, especially when you're dealing with those big, complex apps.
For sure. And this brings us to like the black box problem. A lot of these AI systems, agent included, you don't really know what's going on inside. You give it input, it gives you output, but the logic, the why behind its choices, that's a mystery.
And that's got to be tough for developers who are used to, being in control.
Yeah.
It's hard to trust something when you don't know how it works.
And it gets even harder to predict what it's going to do. If you don't know how it's making decisions, how can you be sure it'll handle those weird edge cases, those unusual situations? That's how you get those bugs that seem to come out of nowhere.
So earlier you mentioned how Replit's pushing that Postgres integration, right?
Yes.
Directly from agent. That's powerful, but it also makes me think about security.
Security is huge, especially when you're dealing with data that needs to be kept private. If agent's the one handling those database connections, Replit needs to have some serious security measures in place. They got to prevent data leaks, unauthorized access, all that. We need to know how they're protecting against SQL injection, how they're encrypting data, how they're handling user logins.
It all boils down to trust. Developers need to feel confident that their data is safe when they're using something like agent.
Absolutely. And Replit needs to be open about how they're doing it. Tell us about their security protocols. Give us the info we need to decide if agent's the right tool for the job, especially for those database tasks.
Okay, so another potential issue I see is this whole vendor lock-in thing. Replit's building this whole ecosystem, right, with agent at the center of it all. But what if, down the line, a developer wants to switch to something else?
Yeah, good point. If you get too used to Replit's way of doing things, their specific tools and all, it could be really tough to move your project somewhere else. You might end up having to rewrite a bunch of your code or learn a whole new way of working.
So it's like you got to weigh the convenience, all those cool Replit features, against the risk of getting stuck with them.
Exactly. Finding that balance is key. Agent can be a useful tool, but you got to know the risks. Think about how it fits into your workflow, long term.
Now, I want to switch gears a bit. Think about different types of developers. We've been talking about the downsides for those who've been coding for a while. But what about new developers, people just starting out?
For them, I think agent could be a good thing, or it could hold them back. It really depends. On one hand, it's a great way to learn. It can help you with the little mistakes, suggest how to complete your code, even give you tips on doing things the right way. It makes coding easier to get into, less scary.
Sounds great for getting started.
Mm.
But I can also see how it might actually make it harder to learn in the long run.
Exactly. If you're always relying on the AI, you might not develop those core skills. Critical thinking, problem solving, all that. You might miss out on those aha moments, the deep understanding that comes from struggling with the code and figuring it out yourself.
It's that balance thing again, right? AI can be great for learning, but you can't let it do all the work. New devs need to experiment, explore, and figure out how things work on their own.
Totally agree. And this is where having a mentor, someone experienced, can make a big difference. They can help new developers use AI the right way so they can learn and grow without becoming too dependent on it.
Okay, let's go back to performance for a minute. Replit says they've made agent faster, more efficient, all that. But do those claims hold up when you're working on a big, complicated project?
That's the real test, isn't it? Stability, efficiency, those are crucial for professional devs. If agent can't handle a large code base, those demanding applications, it's just not going to cut it.
We need to see proof, benchmarks, real-world tests.
Mm.
What happens when you've got multiple sessions going at once? Can it handle those large data sets, complex queries? That's the kind of stuff we need to know.
Absolutely. Replit's got to give us the data so we can make informed decisions. And at the end of the day, the best test is what happens when experienced developers start using it, when they really push it to the limit. That's how we'll know if agent is truly up to the task.
And that, I think, is a perfect way to lead into the last part of our deep dive. When we come back, we'll wrap up by talking about the long-term effects of all this. What do these updates mean for the future of software development? We'll dig into the whole AI-assisted coding thing and what that might look like down the road, the challenges, the opportunities. It's going to be a fascinating discussion. Stay with us. All right, so we've looked at the good and the bad, even the maybe a little bit scary with these new Replit agent updates. But let's zoom out for a minute. Where does all this fit into the big picture of, software development? Where are we headed?
Yeah, the million-dollar question, right? I mean, it's pretty clear AI is becoming more and more a part of how we code. Tools like Replit Agent, they're just the beginning.
So does that mean, like, the end of coding as we know it? Are AI programmers going to take over?
Nah, I don't think so. It's more of an evolution. AI will definitely change how we do things, but I don't see it replacing human developers entirely, at least not anytime soon.
So it's more about, like, our skills changing, the roles we play. Instead of writing every single line of code, maybe developers become more like architects or conductors, guiding the AI, setting the overall direction.
Exactly. Being able to use these AI tools effectively, that's going to be a core skill for any developer. Knowing how to give the AI the right instructions, understand what it gives you back, and make sure it's all aligned with your vision for the project.
It also makes you wonder about how we teach coding, right? If AI is doing all the heavy lifting, do new programmers even need to learn the basics as deeply?
That's a big debate right now. Some people say we should focus on the higher level stuff, the problem solving, and let AI handle the details. Others say, no, you still got to have that strong foundation, even with AI.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out. The boot camps, the universities, even people learning on their own. How do they adapt?
And it's not just the skills. The tools are changing so fast, too. These AI assistants, they're going to get more specialized, more powerful, more integrated into everything we use.
So, like, imagine in the future, you've got an AI assistant just for mobile apps, another one for data science, one for security, each one a total expert in their field.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll get better at working together, too. Multiple developers on the same project, and the AI is anticipating what they need, resolving conflicts, suggesting solutions.
It also makes you think about, like, the quality of the software itself. Could AI lead to more standardized code, more efficient, more reliable?
That's the hope. If AI can take care of the repetitive stuff and offer those smart suggestions, it could definitely cut down on human error, lead to better code overall. But it's not a guarantee. We still need humans in the loop, making sure the code isn't just working, but it's maintainable, it's secure, and it actually meets the goals of the project.
And there's always that risk of, like, unintended consequences, right?
Hmm.
What if the AI introduces some bias into the code or finds a solution that, I don't know, optimizes for one thing but messes up something else?
That's why the ethics of all this is so important. The more powerful AI gets, the more careful we need to be. Thinking about bias, unintended consequences, making sure there's always that human oversight. We need to use these tools responsibly so they actually help us make us better, not, hold us back.
So it's not just about building cool tech for the sake of it. It's about being thoughtful, intentional, thinking about the impact on people.
Absolutely. The future of software development is being written right now. It's up to all of us to make sure it's a good future, a future that benefits everyone, not just a few.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into Replit Agent and, the whole world of AI-assisted coding. It's been a great conversation. Hopefully our listeners had some food for thought as they navigate all this.
Yeah, definitely. Stay curious, try out these new tools, and most importantly, keep thinking critically about AI and what it means for how we code.
Because the future of coding, it's not set in stone.
Mm.
It's being written right now by all of us. The choices we make today, they're going to shape software development for years to come.
So stay engaged, stay informed, stay ahead of the curve. There's a lot of exciting stuff to build.
Until next time, happy coding, everyone.